So I'm here with Anne-Marie Slaughter. My name is Bonnie Greenball Silvestri, and we're going to be talking about the issues that she's going to be dealing with today in her talk about redefining balance. It's been a really important topic for me as becoming a new mother a couple of years ago, and I've been teaching women in the law for many years, and I'm finally seeing how these cases really impact you in a very personal way. And your article is so beautiful because it's so personal, and I just loved it. So can you talk about what prompted you to write this article and where you went from there?
So it's interesting, I've been a career woman all my life. I'd been a kind of poster child for having it all, for proving that you could have a family and a career and nothing stops you. And when I sort of hit a tipping point, when I was in Washington in a dream job and I realized my adolescent sons were back in Princeton with my husband and I needed to go home, I really thought I have to give voice to this, and I have to give voice because I have a credibility that many other women don't have. And I knew that if I said this, no one would be able to say she's not committed to her career or she's not successful or any of that. So I really felt it was hard. It was hard for me to actually admit some of what I wrote to myself, but I knew I was speaking for lots and lots of other women and a growing number of men.
Now, did you feel some of these issues when you first went back to work, or did this start to grow as your children became older? Because most people sort of think about it as an early career issue.
Right. So, I never actually left work because I was a professor, and so I had my children, and I took some time out. I wasn't teaching for a semester, but I was always writing and working with students. I never had any problem when my kids were young. They had great daycare, and I knew that they were better off in daycare than they would be at home with me. I mean, they had other people around them, they had professionals. So I never felt any tug, although I know lots and lots of women do. But I remember older women saying to me, watch out, it's even harder when they're teenagers. And I couldn't imagine that because I thought, come on, it can't get harder than this. I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old that I'm running around. But when they're little and they make mistakes, you hug them, you put a Band-Aid. When they're 14 and they make mistakes, that won't do it. You have to be there, you have to be working with them, and their mistakes have consequences. You're looking at your child and thinking, if you really keep going down this path, your life pattern will be affected. So it's hard to believe when you have young children, but I tell people all the time, at least plan for the possibility that it may not be smooth sailing during teenage years.
I got off the phone with a friend of mine about a week or two before I made a presentation on this topic, and she was saying, wait till you see what happens with homework and how difficult that is when she's a lawyer and working as an attorney all day, and then she has to come home and do the homework. So there's all these different things because I'm thinking about how she pulls my fingers off the keyboard when I'm trying to type. And so there's so many things at each stage. But what can we do to really help women lay the groundwork even as they become pregnant? I think there's issues around when you can notify that you're pregnant, how to go on maternity leave properly. What are some of the things that you think would be helpful to lay that groundwork?
Well, I think the single most important thing we could do is every time you announce that you're having a child, or your husband announces that he's expecting a child or that you are, you ask him, how are you going to balance that, right? Because so much of this is it takes two to create children, but somehow one is responsible much more for the raising of them. So we have to shift the norm. The idea is if you are a guy and you have a child, how are you going to balance that? We should talk about working fathers as well as working mothers. That would start shifting the norms around breadwinning and caregiving, around, hey, wait a minute, if you're a breadwinner and a caregiver, you have to be able to make space in your life. You have to maybe go home earlier, or during that period where they need you for homework, etc. Maybe you need to ramp down a little bit on the amount of work you're doing. Maybe you need to make space for a while, but you're still on the career track. You're still eligible for promotion. You're not dropping out. There's a bunch of deep changes that have to happen in the way we even think about who's in the workplace and who's at home.
And do you think that if men become more engaged in this process, then because they hold the lion's share of power, unfortunately, in Washington at the moment, do you think that we'll be starting to see some shifts? FMLA really needs some work, I would say.
I would say we need paid leave. We are one of 3 countries in the entire world that doesn't have paid maternity leave, and all the other advanced countries have paid family leave, right? So for fathers, for mothers, taking care of your kids, taking care of your parents, I think it's essential that men have have to be part of this. And the good news is young men under 30, are increasingly insisting that they be able to have the same flexibility that women have, that they be able to be totally engaged parents. But it really, as long as our norm is a person who enters the workforce at 25 and exits at 65 and never has to accommodate anything other than the job, we're not going to get there. It's because women can't do it all. It has to be a recognition that our society now has people who are both working and taking care of people at the same time.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. So when you talk about the fact that we're one of only 3 developed nations that have this kind of policy, what are your theories about that? Why that is that the United States is so reluctant when it comes to this kind of policy?
It's such a good question. I think about this all the time because really we're a society that doesn't care about care. And when did that happen? Because it wasn't always true. I mean, actually, if you go back to the frontier, you think about barn raising and communities coming together and people supporting each other, our churches, our sense of family, all of that's very strong. But somehow we got to a place where it's all about work all the time. And we've lost that sense of being a person who's connected to other people in ways that I think hurt us. I don't think it's in the US DNA. I think it's something that happened in the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, where it was all about money and all about work and all about who can, amass the biggest fortune, who can be the most powerful person. That's not the secret of happiness. It's not the secret of productivity. It's not the secret of strong communities. And we have to recover our roots.